My final Premier League predictions. The transfer window has closed, so we're going to predict the Premier League table from 20 to 1. Who's going to be champions, who's going to be in the Champions League, and who's going to be fighting for survival. Let's dive straight in. I think the team that's going to finish bottom of the Premier League is Luton Town. Luton, for me, have got a bit of a championship squad. I think there's concerns at centre-half, but also in terms of midfield as well. I'm just not quite convinced with a midfield three of Chong, Nakamba and Ross Barkley. I think that's far too open for the Premier League. I do like some of their signings. Their two wing-backs that they bought. Ryan Giles has started off pretty well from left wing-back, but I just think Luton are not going to be good enough to finish anywhere else other than 20th in the Premier League. Let's fly through straight away into 19th. We're going to go with the other promoted side, Sheffield United. The Blades have brought some good players in. I like the signing of Cameron Archer, who looked brilliant on his debut. I think he's got real quality in and around the penalty area. But I just don't think they're good enough to stay within the league. I think Gustav Hamer is another really good signing, but a good signing for a team that will be playing championship football next season. I just don't think they've got the quality in midfield, in defence and in the forward line to really stay in the Premier League. So unfortunately, both of the promoted sides that we mentioned so far are going back down. Into 18th. 18th is a very, very hard position to predict. There's a few different teams that I feel will be in and around that battle, the likes of Fulham, Bournemouth, Burnley, Everton, and even Wolves if they don't get it right. Talking Everton, if Everton get it right with Sean Dyche, they'll be absolutely fine. They could be sitting in mid-table, but I do worry about their performances so far. I think the signing of Beto has been absolutely brilliant. He's a player that will run the channels, that can make things happen with the balls at his feet, link with his teammates and so forth. But the issue I feel Everton have got at the moment, defensively, they need to be a lot more solid. Tarkowski, Branthwaite, and of course Patterson and Young need to be far more compact and defensively aware. That is my concern at the moment. The Burnley don't look like a Sean Dyche side. Offensively, Beto, Danjuma, and obviously Calvert-Lewin when he's fit looks good enough going forward. Jimmy Garner's delivery from the right-hand side has been very, very good, but I feel like defensively they're not getting it right at the moment. So for me, Everton, 18th, relegated. Moving to 17th in the Premier League, just surviving that battle for relegation, is Fulham. Fulham have signed well in midfield. I like the additions of Iwobi, in that central midfield area, but they have lost Alexander Mitrovic, a player that was so key to how they played last season. When you're thinking about what Fulham have done and built in the Premier League, they're a high-pressing team that's super aggressive, that will squeeze you in certain areas. Paulinho will get aggressive in your half, but you'll look to cross the ball and get it to Mitrovic into the channels early doors. And I think without someone like Alexander Mitrovic, Fulham will lose their spark in the final third, but also their target. Mitrovic so good in the league, in the air, 14 goals in the Premier League last season. I just don't think they're going to replace that. So for me, Fulham will be battling to stay in the league this season. Moving to the next team, Bournemouth, who I had quite high up in my first Premier League predictions, around 11th. I don't think they'll be that high. Iraola's come in and he set Bournemouth up in kind of a aggressive, crossing, pressing style of football, but there is a bit of a concern for how they play with the ball. There's a lot of direct balls into the channels for Solanke so far, and I feel like they need to move their game on from just playing balls into the channels, because teams will work them out, teams will open them up. Better possession-based sides that can play through their press will be able to get at them. So I think the big thing for Bournemouth in the opening part of the season, it's working on those wide triangles. It's getting the fullback, the midfielder and the winger really combining. The best Iraola side, the Vallecano side, were very fluid in those areas, in the wide areas. They create wide overloads and they'd really open teams up. We've not seen that from Bournemouth yet. So I do worry putting them in 16th position at the moment if they don't manage that ball a little bit better. They've played more long balls per game so far under Iraola than they did last season in any single match. So there is a concern there. They need to be getting the ball down, playing through midfield and using those wide combinations and getting the likes of David Brooks on the ball more. Moving to 15th in the Premier League, another team that I thought would do really well. Vincent Kompany's Burnley. They've started the season off playing, pretty hard teams, Tottenham, Villa, Manchester City, and they've tried to play them off the park. I think Burnley need to become a little bit more pragmatic against the bigger teams in the league, maybe start with a back five, but I still believe Burnley are going to be good against teams in and around them. Got them 15th in the league at the moment, but I do think they are a real unknown. I think there's players in the squad that could really stand up. I've liked what I've seen of Lyle Foster so far, but the big player that I want to see more of is Mike Trezor. Last season in the Belgium League, 24 assists, which is the most of any player in Europe in a league situation last season. 24 assists, 22 big chances created. If Burnley and Vincent Kompany can get Mike Trezor firing in the Premier League, they'll be absolutely fine and they will fly up the league. But for the moment, in 15th. I think they'll beat the teams in and around them, but I think they could get battered by the teams in the top half of the league. Moving forward to Wolverhampton Wanderers, going to put those guys in 14th. The squad is pretty decent. Pedro Neto is obviously a player of great quality. Started off the league season in good form from an assisting perspective. 3 assists in 4 games so far. We could still see more from him in open play. The assists, 2 of them have come from corners, but I do think we need to see a little bit more of Pedro Neto in open play. Goals is still a concern for me. If they can get Klasic scoring and creating from him or playing off the target man, then I think they'll be in a good situation. Gary O'Neill's teams, traditionally will stay in games. They'll be competitive. So imagine Wolves picking up, wins by a goal in certain matches, but losing by a goal in other matches and so forth. So I think Wolves do stay in the Premier League. I think they're solid. 14th sitting in mid-table. On to 13th in the Premier League, comfortable mid-table for Roy Hodgson's Palace. Obviously keeping Michael Olise, him signing a new contract and not signing for Chelsea is big for them. But more importantly, I think has been the forward line. Odsonne Edouard has finally got his scoring boots on in the Premier League. Started the season off well, looking like he's building a great partnership with Matata, which I think is a great option for Roy in the second half of games. If Palace start with a little bit more of a defensive formation, then bring Matata on, go 4-4-2, pushing Ezer into a wide area. It has been absolutely outstanding so far. The last sort of 6 months of his Premier League life has been absolutely brilliant. He's creating, he's scoring goals, he's making things happen for Crystal Palace. So far, he's creating 3.2 chances per game, taking 4.8 shots, adding a whopping 8 shots to Crystal Palace's attack so far. That's a decent number of statistics. Ezer will keep Crystal Palace in solid mid-table. I expect them to do well, but maybe not push for a European spot. Next up, we've got Nottingham Forest. They have done very, very well in the transfer window. I like the signings of Origi, Elanga. You're thinking Hudson-Odoi has got massive potential, and someone like Steve Cooper, who's drawn great levels out of youngsters like Brennan Johnson and Morgan Gibbs-White, is a good addition. Pretty cheap, under £8 million with the add-ons. But also you're looking at Sangare, signed from PSV Eindhoven. This guy is going to be brilliant in the Premier League. He's someone that one of the top teams could have bought and they've been linked with for a while, but now he's at Forest. They're starting to build a top quality midfield unit. Nico Dominguez as well in central midfield has got good tackle numbers, also got a bit of creativity about him in central midfield. You're looking at the back lines being reinforced. I really like what Forest have done, but I think more importantly, away from home, they look a lot better. Some really good performances at the early parts of the season against Manchester United, Chelsea and Arsenal, all away. Forest are slightly more defensive in these games, playing Danilo as a kind of attacking midfielder, considering he's more of a box-to-box midfielder, gives them a little bit more solidity in that zone, allowing Owoni to really hold the ball up and get players in and around him. Nottingham Forest will be a very hard team to beat this season. We've got them in 12th. Right, on to one of the biggest teams in London. That is West Ham United, Europa Conference League holders. I do think their start has been really, really good. The signings they've made in the summer, I'm actually quite jealous about them. Bringing the likes of Mohamed Kudus to West Ham, Edison Alvarez and James Ward-Prowse. That's 3 players I would take at Manchester United. But I do think James Ward-Prowse really defines this West Ham team. His ability from set pieces completely changes the dynamic for West Ham. Last season, West Ham massively underperformed with their set pieces. The season before, they were one of the best in the league. Now they've got that. They're really good routine routines and one of the best set-piece takers on the planet. James Ward-Prowse has already made impact from corners, from free kicks, but now we're going to see West Ham be able to get into games, be able to nick leads, and then sit back and counter-attack, allowing the likes of Jared Bowen, Kudos, and Mikel Antonio to really exploit that space. I think West Ham will have a good season, but I feel as the Europa League kicks in, West Ham focus will move to that European competition. The league form will suffer a little bit, and they'll finish the season in around 11th. Moving to Brentford, I think one of the only predictions that I'm keeping exactly the same from the Premier League predictions is Brentford. Them sat in 10th place in the Premier League. Visser and, of course, and Burmo have started the season absolutely flying in form. And, of course, they've got the likes of Ivan Toney to come back in January. They'll be absolutely fine. They'll be competitive. They'll be hard to beat under Thomas Frank. But I don't think I don't think they're going to be pushing for a European place. I think there's teams ahead of them that are better set for that. But I think they'll have another really good season, finishing the top half of the Premier League. Moving on to another team that I feel may underperform even more this season, it's Newcastle United. Initially, in our predictions, we had them in 7th place. The reason for that position was I felt that their squad isn't deep enough to compete on multiple fronts. We're talking Champions League, Premier League, FA Cup, League Cup. When you look at their first 11, it is absolutely fantastic. It is so competitive. But my concern is that when you take certain players out of that starting 11, such as a Sven Botman, the quality really drops off. When you look at what they've now got in terms of a group in the Champions League with AC Milan, PSG and Borussia Dortmund, it means they need to play their best team midweek, which means their Premier League form will struggle, and that is why we are dropping Newcastle United down to 9th place in the Premier League. I think they'll do well in Europe. I think they will actually get out of the group. But I do think their league form will suffer, which will see Spurs and Brighton go ahead of them in the Premier League. We've got Newcastle in 9th. It's bold. Right, moving forward to the next position. 8th, I think it's going to go to Chelsea. Chelsea's recruitment over the last few windows has been nothing short of crazy. The amount of signings they've made, the money they've spent another 460 odd million euros this window. The signings have been pretty decent. I like them, but the blend needs to come. It's a classic thing when you sign a load of new players and get a new manager. It's going to take real time to understand how this team is going to come together. There's still question marks on what's the best starting team for Chelsea. What's the best starting formation? Is it with wing-backs? Is it a back four? Where does Sterling play? Is Nicholas Jackson the right player for them up front? How do they blend the midfield? Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez, Lavia when he comes back. What's the best defensive setup for them? There's a lot of questions for Pochettino to answer, and that is why we have got Chelsea sitting in 8th in the Premier League. They need to find balance and they need to settle down the squad and don't buy anyone in January. It's as simple as that. Moving to the first European place, I think we're going to stick with Aston Villa performing well this season. They've had a great window. As we mentioned, Diaby started off the season in great form. He's always going to be a threat in front of goal, directly involved in 3 goals in his first 4 games. Zaniolo is a brilliant addition from Galatasaray. Great value. I think he's going to give a good creative spark for Aston Villa. They've already got a few good left-footed attackers in Leon Bailey, in Diaby. Adding Zaniolo is just another player of supreme quality. Ollie Watkins will get scoring goals. The midfield blend is going to be good. I quite like the signing of Longley at the back end of the window as well to add to that defensive solidity. And throwing Matty Cash as a right winger has been a pretty brave move for Unai Emery that's come up trumps so far. Grabbed a really good brace at the start of the season. I like Matty Cash a little higher up. So I do think that Villa will finish in those European places. 7th place for Aston Villa and a good run in the Europa Conference League will be a good season for Unai Emery's side. On to 6th position, bumped up 3 places from a first predictions video. That is Brighton. They have made some fantastic acquisitions in the market, but also got their best expected goals in the league so far. They've scored the most goals, and they have recruited so well. You look at that starting 11, Ferguson and João Pedro as a front two, Matoma, Marsh out wide. You're thinking the loss of Caicedo has basically gone unnoticed. Billy Gilmour started the season well with Pascal Gross in central midfield, but also you're thinking James Milner to come in, you've got Dahoud, but also when you look at the players they've brought in and they've added to the squad, it's just really, really good recruitment. Brighton's latest player to join and to basically will surprise the world in the next 2 to 3 weeks, it's going to be Carlos Baleba, a player that they've bought in from Lille, a player that I very, very much enjoy watching and really like. You're looking from a dynamic ball-playing perspective in central midfield. He is a classic Brighton central midfielder. He's going to come in and replace Caicedo. Could be even better. The way that he is aggressive off the ball, his understanding, his dribbling and carrying, and he's a classic player that's going to win those ground duels. Perfect signing, and probably Chelsea are going to buy him for 200 million next summer. Brighton have once again done brilliant in the market. They've won it, and not to mention they've signed Ansu Fati from Barcelona. No, we're not playing Football Manager. This is real football. Ansu Fati on loan is a great acquisition. You see how he could be used in those attacking positions as a 9. Would get great quality out of him. Linking with Ferguson, linking with Pedro, linking with Danny Welbeck. Brighton are really building something special. 6th position finish for me in the Premier League. Moving on to the Champions League spot in the Premier League. Very contested for 5 teams for me. That's Man United, Liverpool, Spurs, Arsenal, Manchester City. I think we can rule out City and Arsenal. I think they're 1 and 2 in the Premier League. I think they are far ahead of the rest of the league right now, which leaves Liverpool, Spurs and Manchester United. I do think Spurs have started so well in the league. Postecoglou's tactics and style are absolutely brilliant to watch. The way that he's created this kind of 2-3-5 structure in possession with inverted fullbacks moving inside. Udogie looks like a fantastic acquisition from Italy. Looks very calm, but defensively looks well. And also when you're bringing in the likes of James Maddison, and he's playing at the level that we all know he can play, you've got a team there that's at top quality. But I do think the ace card is Heung-min Son as a false 9. I think that is going to be a lot of goals for Spurs. The way that he links, the way that he can finish, but also get on the end of moves after linking deep in midfield. He is the perfect number 9 for Postecoglou. So for me, Spurs, 4th place. And I do think with Manchester United right now, they're an absolute mess. No right winger. You don't know what they're going to be doing in terms of the formation, the setup. Højlund's come in with a lot of pressure on his back. The signing of Amrabat at the end of the window should have happened at the start of the window. It's an absolute mess. It's difficult to predict Manchester United anyway other than 5th in the Premier League at the moment, which leaves Liverpool with Darwin Núñez at 3rd in the league. I think Darwin Núñez is going to really start to explode in his Liverpool career. 2 goals and 2 assists in his last 3 games. Feel like this is his time to really come out, start being more clinical in front of goal, but that link players are already starting to improve. If Jurgen Klopp can get him up to anywhere near the levels that we can perceive him to be, they'll have one of the best number 9s in European football, not only the Premier League. So for me, I've got Man United in 5th, Spurs in 4th, and Liverpool in 3rd, which leaves the top 2. Arsenal and Manchester City. Arsenal's signings have been great over the summer. Their style of football is absolutely fantastic. Gabriel Jesus is now back flying. Declan Rice has shown why he's been worth over 100 million so far for Arsenal. Really important goal against Manchester United after a brilliant display in central midfield. Absolutely bossed it in that area. The one thing that I'd say though, Manchester City, the treble winners, Erling Haaland, back to his goals, but Julian Alvarez is going to be the ace player for them this season. I feel that Alvarez-Haaland front 2 is going to be so difficult to play against. The balance, the blend is absolutely fantastic. The way that Alvarez operates, deep in midfield, playing forward at certain times, other times as a second striker, getting in and around Haaland, is going to be so difficult for Premier League teams to play against. If you haven't already dealt with one of the best number 9s we've ever seen in European football in Erling Haaland, you've now got to deal with the movement of one of the players in European football. I think is the most underrated in Julian Alvarez. Haaland's already got 6 goals in 4 games, but Julian Alvarez is really starting to contribute for Manchester City in the higher ends of the pitch. Throw in Phil Foden, who's playing more of a inside right position from the right wing for Manchester City. That creative role was really, really good against Newcastle. Driving inside from that right wing area, created a whopping 7 chances and 1 assist. That combination play with Alvarez inside and Erling Haaland, City are going to win the league. But on top of that, 10 teams have won the treble in European football. 9 of those have gone on to win the league the next season. So for me, Manchester City 1, Arsenal 2nd is how the Premier League table is going to end. Do get into the comments below your Premier League predictions, 1 to 20. These are my final predictions. We aren't messing about after this. I've been Statman Dave. Subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you later.